I was standing in my front yard on a Tuesday morning in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, when I heard the clicking of high heels on the sidewalk behind me, and I knew without turning around that this was going to be trouble. My name is Trevor Jackson, and I had just finished placing a small memorial garden in my front yard to honor my late brother Marcus, who had died in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. The memorial was simple but meaningful. A brass plaque mounted on a natural stone, an American flag planted beside it, and a few white roses arranged around the base. I had spent weeks planning it, making sure every detail was perfect, every word on that plaque exactly right. "Excuse me," a shrill voice called out, dripping with the kind of fake politeness that only came from someone who was about to make your life miserable. "I need to speak with you immediately." I turned around to see a woman in her late 40s marching toward me with a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Her blonde hair was styled in that particular way that screamed manager requests and expired coupons. She wore a cream-colored blazer despite the fact that it was already 85 degrees at 9 in the morning, and her lips were pursed so tight they looked like a cat's behind. "Can I help you?" I asked, wiping the dirt from my hands onto my jeans. "I'm Linda Patterson, the president of the Saguaro Hills Homeowners Association," she announced, as if I should drop to my knees in gratitude for her presence. "And I'm afraid that structure you've erected in your front yard is in direct violation of Section 4.7 of our HOA covenant." I felt my jaw tighten. That structure is a memorial for my brother who served in the United States Marine Corps and gave his life for this country. Linda's expression didn't soften even a millimeter. "I understand that, Mr. Jackson, but rules are rules. The covenant clearly states that no structures, decorative elements, or landscaping features can be added to front yards without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. You didn't submit any application, did you?" "No, I didn't think I needed to for something like this," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It's a memorial. It's protected speech under the First Amendment." She let out a condescending laugh that made my blood pressure spike. "The First Amendment doesn't apply to private homeowners associations, Mr. Jackson. We have rules here, and everyone must follow them, regardless of their personal circumstances. I'm sorry about your brother, truly, but you'll need to remove it within 48 hours or face daily fines of $100. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. "You're serious. Completely serious. I've already documented the violation with photographs." She held up her phone, showing me pictures she had apparently taken of my front yard before even bothering to speak with me. "You'll receive an official notice in the mail, but I wanted to give you the courtesy of informing you in person." "That's not courtesy, that's harassment," I said, my voice harder now. "You're telling me I can't honor my brother's sacrifice." Linda straightened her blazer with her free hand. "I'm telling you that you need to follow the established procedures. If you had submitted an application 3 weeks ago, the committee would have reviewed it, and we might have been able to work something out. But you can't just do whatever you want. What if everyone started putting up memorials and decorations without permission? The neighborhood would look like a flea market. A memorial to a fallen Marine is not a lawn flamingo," I shot back. "The rules don't differentiate," she said coldly. 48 hours, Mr. Jackson. Remove it or pay the fines. Your choice." She turned on those clicking heels and walked away, leaving me standing there with rage building in my chest like a pressure cooker about to explode. I looked down at Marcus's memorial, at the plaque that read, "Corporal Marcus Jackson, USMC, 1989-2021. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." There was no way in hell I was removing it by that afternoon. I was sitting in the office of Daniel Morris, a First Amendment lawyer whose name I had found through a veterans advocacy group online. His office was located in downtown Phoenix, a modest space in a brick building with plants on every available surface and law books lining the walls. Daniel himself was probably in his mid-50s, with gray creeping into his dark hair and the kind of calm, measured demeanor that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said, after I had given him the basic overview. I walked him through the entire encounter with Linda Patterson, showing him photos of the memorial on my phone and the text message I had received an hour ago with a link to the official violation notice from the HOA. Daniel listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting down notes on a yellow legal pad. "Have you lived in this community long?" he asked when I finished. "5 years. Bought the house after I got out of the Army myself. I served for 8 years, got out as a sergeant. My brother stayed in, kept climbing the ranks. He was on his 3rd deployment when." I trailed off, the words still hard even after 3 years. Daniel nodded with understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss. Now, here's the thing. Your HOA president is both right and wrong. She's right that HOAs generally have the authority to enforce architectural guidelines and aesthetic restrictions. However, she's very wrong about the First Amendment not applying here." "How so?" I leaned forward in my chair. "There are federal protections specifically for the right to display the American flag and military symbols. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 prevents HOAs from prohibiting homeowners from displaying the flag. Additionally, Arizona has its own state statute that protects the display of military memorial items. Beyond that, we can argue that this is protected symbolic speech under the First Amendment, which does apply even in HOA contexts when the speech is of a particular type. So I don't have to remove it. Not only do you not have to remove it, but I think we can make a strong case that the HOA's threat of fines is illegal. I'll need to review your HOA documents, the covenant conditions and restrictions, and draft a response to their violation notice." "How do you feel about pushing back on this?" I didn't even hesitate. "Whatever it takes. Marcus deserves better than being erased because some HOA president thinks a memorial garden violates her sense of suburban aesthetics." "Good. Let me be clear, though. This could get messy. HOAs don't like being challenged, and Miss Patterson sounds like the type who will dig in her heels. Are you prepared for this to potentially escalate?" "I've dealt with worse than an angry HOA president," I said. Daniel smiled slightly. "I believe you." "All right, get me copies of all your HOA documents. Everything you signed when you bought the house. Any amendments to the covenants, bylaws, anything related to the architectural review process. I'll start drafting our response today." I left his office feeling like I could breathe again. Someone was in my corner, someone who understood both the law and what this memorial meant. I spent the rest of the afternoon digging through old files in my home office, scanning and emailing everything to Daniel. My wife Emily had died 2 years ago from cancer, so the house felt especially empty as I worked. Marcus and Emily had been the 2 people I was closest to in the world, and now they were both gone. That memorial wasn't just about Marcus. It was about keeping their memory alive, about having something tangible that said they mattered. The 48-hour deadline came and went. I didn't touch the memorial. On the 3rd morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox containing another notice from the HOA. This one informing me that I was now being fined $100 per day for continued non-compliance, and that the fines would continue to accumulate until the violation was corrected. I photographed the notice and sent it to Daniel. He called me an hour later. I've finished our response. I'm hand-delivering it to the HOA office this afternoon, and I'm also sending copies to each member of the board. Essentially, I've informed them that their actions violate both federal and state law, that you have a constitutional right to display this memorial, and that if they continue with these fines, we will pursue legal action, including a claim for damages and attorney's fees. How do you think they'll react? I asked. Honestly, I think Linda Patterson will lose her mind, but the other board members might be more reasonable once they understand the legal exposure they're facing. HOAs are insured, but insurance doesn't cover willful violations of constitutional rights. Board members can potentially be held personally liable. Good, I said. Maybe that will wake them up. That evening, I was grilling chicken in my backyard when my doorbell rang. I walked through the house and opened the front door to find a man in his 60s standing there with an apologetic expression. He was tall and thin, wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt with the Saguaro Hills logo on it. "Trevor Jackson?" he asked. "That's me." "I'm Robert Chen. I'm on the HOA board. Vice President, actually. Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" I considered closing the door in his face, but something about his demeanor made me pause. He didn't have that aggressive entitlement that Linda radiated. "All right. What do you want to say?" "First, I want to apologize. I saw your memorial yesterday and I read the plaque. I'm a veteran myself, Navy, served in Desert Storm. What you've created is beautiful and respectful, and I'm ashamed that our first response was to threaten you with fines. I wasn't expecting that." "Does Linda know you're here?" Robert grimaced. "No, and she'd probably try to have me removed from the board if she did. But I talked to 2 other board members today after we received your lawyer's letter. We're concerned that Linda is going to drag the entire HOA into a lawsuit we can't win and shouldn't be fighting in the first place." "Then, why is she pushing this so hard?" I asked. "Because Linda sees the HOA as her personal kingdom. She's been president for 6 years, and she runs it like a dictatorship. Most homeowners don't come to the meetings, so she just does whatever she wants. But this is different. Your lawyer's letter was very thorough, very clear about the legal problems we're facing. 3 of us want to override Linda and approve your memorial retroactively. How many board members are there? 5 total. We need 3 votes to pass something. The problem is that Linda has one other member who always votes with her, a woman named Patricia who's basically her clone. So it would be 3-2 and Linda would be outvoted." I leaned against the doorframe. "What do you need from me?" "There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow night at 7. We're calling it specifically to address your situation. I wanted to give you a heads up and to ask if you'd be willing to attend and speak. Bring your lawyer if you want. The more pressure we can put on Linda to back down, the better." "I'll be there," I said. "And Daniel will too." Robert nodded and shook my hand. "Thank you. And again, I'm sorry it came to this. Your brother's sacrifice should be honored, not treated like a code violation." After he left, I called Daniel and filled him in. He was pleased with this development but cautioned me not to get my hopes up. Even if the board votes to approve it, Linda could still try to cause problems. And there's the issue of the fines that have already been assessed. We need those waived and expunged from your account. The next evening, I pulled up to the Saguaro Hills Community Center at 6:45. Daniel was already there, waiting in the parking lot with his briefcase. We walked in together and found a meeting room set up with a long table at the front where the 5 board members would sit and rows of folding chairs for residents. A few other homeowners were already there, curious about the emergency meeting. Linda Patterson arrived at exactly 7, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. When she saw me and Daniel sitting in the front row, Her face went through several interesting color changes, settling on an angry crimson. She took her seat at the center of the table, with Robert Chen on her right and 3 other board members filling out the rest of the seats. Patricia, the woman Robert had mentioned, sat on Linda's immediate left and was dressed almost identically to Linda, like they had coordinated their outfits. "This meeting will come to order," Linda said sharply, banging a gavel that seemed absurdly oversized for the small gathering. "We're here to discuss a covenant violation at 4782 Desert Sage Drive, the property owned by Trevor Jackson." Robert cleared his throat. "Linda, I think we need to frame this differently. We're here to discuss retroactive approval of a military memorial and to address potential legal issues that have been raised." Linda's eyes flashed with anger. "We're here because Mr. Jackson violated our covenants and then hired a lawyer to threaten us instead of simply following the rules like everyone else." Daniel stood up smoothly. "If I may address the board, my name is Daniel Morris, and I represent Mr. Jackson. I think it's important that everyone understand the legal situation before this discussion goes any further. May I approach?" Linda looked like she wanted to refuse, but Robert said, "Please, go ahead." Daniel walked to the front and handed each board member a packet of documents. "What you're looking at is a legal memorandum outlining the federal and state protections for displaying the American flag and military memorial items. You'll see citations to the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act, Arizona Revised Statute 33-1808, and relevant case law. The bottom line is this: HOAs in Arizona cannot prohibit homeowners from displaying reasonable military memorials, and any fines or penalties imposed for such displays are legally unenforceable and may expose the HOA and individual board members to liability." A woman with gray hair at the end of the table, who I later learned was named Margaret, raised her hand tentatively. "Does this mean we could be sued personally?" "If you continue to assess fines knowing that Mr. Jackson's memorial is legally protected, yes, you could be found personally liable for willful violation of his constitutional rights. That's not covered by the HOA's general liability insurance." Patricia spoke up, her voice just as shrill as Linda's. "This is intimidation. You're trying to scare us into letting him break our rules." "I'm trying to inform you of the law before you make a decision that will cost this HOA tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and potential damages," Daniel said calmly. "Mr. Jackson has no desire to sue anyone. He simply wants to honor his brother's memory in peace. The question is whether this board will respect his legal right to do so." Linda grabbed the gavel again. "I move that we proceed with the fines as outlined in the original violation notice, and that we reject Mr. Jackson's memorial as non-compliant with our architectural standards." "I second that motion," Patricia said immediately. Robert leaned forward. "Before we vote, I'd like to hear from Mr. Jackson himself. Sir, would you tell us about your brother and why this memorial is important to you?" I stood up, my hands shaking slightly. Public speaking had never been my favorite thing, but I wasn't going to let that stop me now. "My brother Marcus was 3 years younger than me. We grew up in Tucson, and we both joined the military right out of high school. I did 8 years in the Army. He made the Marines his career. Marcus was one of those guys who was born to lead. His men loved him because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He was on patrol in Helmand Province when his unit was ambushed. Marcus was killed providing covering fire so his squad could reach safety. Every single one of his men made it out alive because of him." I paused, swallowing hard. "I put that memorial in my front yard because I want people to remember that freedom isn't free. I want my neighbors' kids to see it and maybe ask their parents about it. I want Marcus's name to mean something, to not just be another statistic. It's not some elaborate structure. It's a stone, a plaque, a flag, and some flowers. But it matters to me more than anything else in that yard, maybe more than anything else I own. And I'm not taking it down because someone thinks it violates a rule about lawn decorations. The room was quiet for a moment. I could see Margaret wiping her eyes, and even the fourth board member, a middle-aged man named Gary, looked moved. Robert nodded at me with respect. Linda, however, looked unmoved. "That's a very touching story, Mr. Jackson, but our covenants exist to protect property values for all residents. If we make an exception for you, we'll have to make exceptions for everyone." "This isn't an exception," Daniel interjected. "This is compliance with federal and state law which supersedes your covenants. Your covenants cannot legally prohibit this memorial." "We'll let a judge decide that," Linda snapped. Robert held up his hand. "Linda, I don't think you're hearing what Mr. Morris is saying. If we pursue this, we will lose, and it will cost the HOA a fortune. I move that we grant retroactive approval for Mr. Jackson's memorial and waive all fines that have been assessed." "I second that motion," Margaret said quickly. Gary nodded. "I agree. I think we're on the wrong side of this." Linda's face had gone from red to almost purple. "You're all letting him bully us into backing down. This sets a terrible precedent." "The precedent it sets is that we respect the law and we honor military service," Robert said firmly. "All in favor of approving the memorial and waiving the fines." 3 hands went up: Robert, Margaret, and Gary. "Opposed?" Linda and Patricia raised their hands. "The motion carries 3-2, Robert said. "Mr. Jackson, your memorial is approved and all fines are waived. On behalf of the board, I apologize for the distress this has caused you." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Linda stood up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly across the floor. "This meeting is adjourned." She grabbed her papers and stormed out of the room with Patricia scurrying after her like a loyal minion. Daniel shook hands with the 3 board members who had voted in our favor. "Thank you for making the right decision. This didn't have to become a legal battle, and I'm glad it won't." As we walked out to the parking lot, I felt like I could breathe properly for the first time in days. "I can't believe that actually worked." "The law was clearly on our side," Daniel said. "And you had some reasonable people on that board who understood that. But I have to warn you, Linda Patterson doesn't strike me as someone who accepts defeat gracefully. Keep an eye out for any retaliation." "What kind of retaliation?" "Oh, she might start scrutinizing your property for other violations. Some HOA presidents, when they feel they've been challenged, become vindictive. Just be aware." I thanked Daniel and drove home, feeling better than I had in a week. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment and just looked at Marcus's memorial in the glow of my porch light. The brass plaque gleamed, and the flag moved slightly in the evening breeze. "We did it, brother," I said quietly. "They tried to erase you, but we didn't let them." For about a week, everything was peaceful. I went to work at the construction company where I was a project manager, came home, took care of the house, and tended to Marcus's memorial. I replaced the roses when they started to wilt and kept the area around it neat and clean. Neighbors started stopping by to comment on it. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door told me it was beautiful. The family across the street, the Hendersons, said they appreciated it and thanked me for my service and Marcus's sacrifice. Then the letters started. The first one arrived in my mailbox on a Saturday morning. It was from the HOA, informing me that my grass was 1/4 inch too tall according to covenant standards, and that I needed to mow it within 24 hours or face a fine of $50. I measured my grass with a ruler, and it was exactly 2 inches tall, which was within the allowed range of 1.5 to 2.5 inches. I documented it with photographs and time-stamped measurements, then sent everything to Daniel. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one claimed that my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-trash day, violating Covenant Section 6.3. The thing was, my trash cans were in my garage, where they always were except on pickup days. I took photos of my closed garage and sent those to Daniel too. The following week, I received a violation notice claiming that my house's exterior paint color had faded and needed to be repainted to match the approved color palette. My house had been repainted 8 months ago, and the color was still perfect. I had the receipt from the painting company and photos from the day it was finished. "She's harassing you," Daniel said when I met with him to discuss the growing pile of bogus violation notices. "This is classic retaliation and it's actually actionable. We can file a complaint." "Will it stop her?" I asked, frustrated. "It might, especially if we get a judge involved. But Trevor, I want you to understand something. People like Linda Patterson don't respond well to being told no. She's lost control of the situation and now she's trying to punish you. This could continue escalating. So what do I do? Document everything. Every interaction, every letter, every photograph that disproves her claims. We're building a case for harassment, and when we have enough evidence, we'll file suit against her personally and against the HOA for allowing her to abuse her position." I left Daniel's office feeling both vindicated and exhausted. This was taking up so much of my time and energy I didn't really have. Work was demanding, and I was still dealing with the grief of losing both Marcus and Emily. Some days it felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. The harassment continued. Over the next month, I received 17 violation notices from the HOA. My mailbox was supposedly the wrong shade of white. My front door wreath was too large. A tree in my backyard had a branch that allegedly extended into the airspace above my neighbor's property by 3 inches. The most absurd one claimed that my doormat was not on the approved doormat list and constituted a violation of exterior decoration standards. Daniel compiled everything into a comprehensive document and filed a lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court. We sued Linda Patterson individually for harassment and abuse of power, and we sued the HOA for allowing her behavior to continue. We sought an injunction to stop the harassment, damages for emotional distress, and attorney's fees. The lawsuit was filed on a Tuesday morning in late July. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing off the hook. Robert Chen called first. "Trevor, I just want you to know that 3 of us on the board were not aware of the extent of Linda's actions. When we saw the lawsuit and the exhibits showing all these violation notices, we were horrified. We're calling an emergency board meeting tonight to address this." "Good," I said, "because this has been hell. I know, and I'm sorry. We should have been paying closer attention." The second call came from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a man's voice said, "Mr. Jackson, my name is Thomas Rodriguez. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Republic, and I'm calling about your lawsuit against your HOA. Would you be willing to speak with me?" I hesitated. Daniel had warned me that the lawsuit might attract media attention, but I hadn't really thought through what that would mean. "Can I call you back in an hour?" I asked. "I want to talk to my lawyer first." "Of course. I'll text you my direct number." I immediately called Daniel. "There's a reporter from the Arizona Republic who wants to interview me about the lawsuit." "You want to do it?" Daniel asked. "I don't know. Will it help our case?" "It could. Public pressure sometimes forces HOAs to back down faster than legal pressure does." But it will also make this more public than it already is. Your name will be in the newspaper. People will have opinions. Marcus deserves to have his story told, I said slowly. If this helps even one other person stand up to an abusive HOA, it's worth it. All right. I'll be on the call with you to make sure you don't say anything that could hurt the case. An hour later, I was on the phone with Thomas Rodriguez while Daniel listened in. Thomas was professional and respectful, asking me about Marcus's service, the memorial, Linda's initial demand, and the subsequent harassment. How has this affected you personally? Thomas asked. It's been exhausting, I admitted. I lost my brother 3 years ago, and I lost my wife 2 years ago. That memorial is one of the few things that brings me peace. To have someone tell me I can't honor my brother, and then to be harassed for months because I stood up for what's right, it's been incredibly difficult. What do you want to happen now? I want Linda Patterson to stop abusing her power. I want the HOA to focus on actually serving the community instead of acting like a petty dictatorship. And I want other people who are dealing with similar situations to know that they have rights and they don't have to just accept it when an HOA goes too far. The article ran on the front page of the local section 2 days later. The headline read, Phoenix veteran sues HOA after memorial to fallen brother sparks harassment campaign. The article included a photo of Marcus's memorial and a sidebar explaining the federal and state laws protecting military displays. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone started getting calls and texts from people I hadn't heard from in years, offering support. The story was picked up by several television stations, and by Friday morning, there were news vans parked on my street. I gave one on-camera interview, standing in my front yard with Marcus's memorial visible in the background, and reiterated the same points I had made to Thomas Rodriguez. The story went viral on social media. People were outraged on my behalf, sharing the articles and videos with comments about HOA overreach and the importance of honoring veterans. A few local veterans organizations reached out, offering their support and asking if they could help in any way. But the most significant call came from Robert Chen on Friday evening. Trevor, I wanted to let you know that Linda Patterson resigned from the HOA board this afternoon. Patricia resigned too. They both cited the media attention and said they felt they could no longer serve effectively. I sat down on my couch, processing this information. They resigned. Yes. And the 3 remaining board members voted to settle the lawsuit. We want to issue a formal apology, pay your attorney's fees, and pay you $25,000 in damages. We'll also be implementing new policies to prevent this kind of abuse from happening in the future. What kind of policies? Mandatory training for board members on constitutional rights and applicable laws. A review process for violation notices to ensure they're legitimate before they're sent out, and a homeowner advocate position, someone residents can go to if they feel they're being treated unfairly. That sounds good, I said, but I want one more thing. Name it. I want a formal acknowledgement in the HOA records that my memorial is protected and that no future board can attempt to remove it or fine me for it. Done. I'll have our attorney draft that language and include it in the settlement. We worked out the final details over the next week. Daniel reviewed the settlement agreement carefully, making sure every protection we needed was included. On a sunny morning in mid-August, I went to the HOA office and signed the papers. Robert was there, along with Margaret and Gary. We're truly sorry for what you went through, Margaret said sincerely, and we're committed to making sure this HOA operates differently going forward. I appreciate that, I said. I never wanted to be at war with my own HOA. I just wanted to honor my brother. "You've done more than that," Gary said. "You've changed how this community operates, and that's going to benefit everyone who lives here." The settlement check covered Daniel's fees with some left over. I took that extra money and used it to enhance Marcus's memorial slightly. I added solar-powered lights that would illuminate the plaque at night, and I planted perennial flowers that would bloom year-round, requiring less maintenance, but always keeping the space vibrant and alive. News of the settlement spread through the neighborhood quickly. More neighbors stopped by to see the memorial and to thank me for standing up to the HOA. A few people shared their own stories of receiving bogus violation notices from Linda, and there was a general sense of relief that she was gone. About a month after the settlement, on a Saturday morning in September, I was out front watering the flowers around Marcus's memorial when an older man I didn't recognize approached. He was probably in his 70s, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap and walking with a slight limp. "You Trevor Jackson?" he asked. "I am." He extended his hand. "Name's Frank Peterson. I live about 6 blocks from here, different HOA thankfully. I read about what you went through and I wanted to shake your hand. I've got a memorial to my son in my yard too. He died in Iraq in 2004. My HOA tried to pull the same thing yours did." "What happened?" I asked. "I told them to go to hell, pardon my language, and I got myself a lawyer too. But this was back in 2006, before all these protections were as clear as they are now. It took me 2 years and cost me a fortune in legal fees. But I won, and that memorial is still there." "I'm sorry you had to go through that," I said, "but I'm glad you won." "Me too. Listen, I'm part of a group called Arizona Veterans for Constitutional Rights. We help veterans who are dealing with issues like this. I wanted to give you our information, in case you ever want to get involved. We could use someone like you, someone who's been through it recently and knows how the system works now." He handed me a business card with contact information. "We meet once a month and we've helped dozens of families protect their memorials and their rights. Think about it." "I will," I promised. "Thank you for stopping by." After he left, I looked at the business card, then at Marcus's memorial. Frank was right. I had learned so much through this process, and maybe I could use that experience to help other people. Marcus would have liked that. He was always the first to help someone in need. The following month, I attended my first meeting of Arizona Veterans for Constitutional Rights. It was held in a VFW hall in Tempe, and about 30 people were there, mostly veterans and their family members. Frank introduced me to the group and asked me to share my story. I talked for about 15 minutes, walking them through everything from Linda's initial demand to the harassment campaign to the eventual settlement. When I finished, several people came up to me with their own stories. A woman whose father had served in World War II, and whose HOA was trying to make her remove a flagpole. A young veteran who had been threatened with fines for having a Marine Corps flag flying below his American flag. An elderly couple whose son had died in Vietnam, and whose memorial plaque had been deemed too large by their architectural review committee. I exchanged contact information with all of them and offered to connect them with Daniel if they needed legal help. Over the next few months, I became increasingly involved with the organization. We successfully helped the woman keep her flagpole by citing the same federal law that had protected my memorial. The young veteran's case was resolved when his HOA's attorney informed the board they would lose if they pursued it. The elderly couple ended up in mediation, but they reached a compromise that allowed them to keep a slightly smaller version of their original memorial. Life settled into a new rhythm. Work kept me busy during the week, and I spent my weekends volunteering with the Veterans' Rights Organization and taking care of my house. The memorial required very little maintenance, thanks to the perennial flowers and the durable materials I had chosen, but I still visited it every day. Sometimes I would stand there for just a minute. Other times I would sit on the small bench I had added nearby and talk to Marcus, telling him about my day or about something funny I had seen. The holidays were hard, as they always were without Marcus and Emily, but they were a little easier knowing that Marcus was honored and remembered. On Veterans Day, I came home from work to find that someone had left flowers at the memorial. There was no note, just a simple bouquet of red, white, and blue flowers. It happened again on Memorial Day, and then on the anniversary of Marcus's death. I never found out who was leaving them, but it touched me deeply to know that someone else was thinking of him too. One evening in early December, about 6 months after the settlement, I ran into Robert Chen at the grocery store. We chatted for a few minutes, catching up on how things were going with the HOA. "It's been so much better," Robert said. "We actually had a contested election for board positions last month. 7 people ran for 3 open seats. That never happened when Linda was in charge because everyone was too intimidated to get involved." "That's great," I said. "It sounds like the community is healthier." "It is. And a lot of that is because of you. You showed people that they don't have to just accept it when someone abuses their authority. That matters." As I drove home with my groceries, I thought about what Robert had said. I had never set out to change anything beyond protecting Marcus's memorial, but somehow this had become about something bigger. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. It was about refusing to let bullies win. And it was about honoring the sacrifices that people like Marcus had made by protecting the freedoms they fought for. That night, I sat on the bench next to the memorial as the solar lights came on, illuminating Marcus's name and the words I had chosen for his plaque. The neighborhood was quiet, just the sound of a breeze through the palm trees and the distant hum of traffic. "I know you'd probably tell me I made too big a deal out of all this," I said to the night air, to Marcus's memory. "You'd say it was just a memorial, just a plaque." But it wasn't just that to me. It was about making sure people remember you, remember what you did. And maybe now, because of everything that happened, a few more people understand how important that is. A car drove by slowly, and I saw the driver glance at the memorial. They might not have known Marcus, might not have known his story, but they saw his name, saw that he had served, saw that he had mattered. And that was enough. The lawsuit had officially ended, but its impact continued to ripple outward. Daniel told me that he had been contacted by 3 other attorneys in Arizona asking for guidance on similar cases. Apparently, my case was being cited as precedent in disputes between veterans and their HOAs. The Arizona Veterans for Constitutional Rights organization had seen a surge in membership and donations after my story went public, allowing them to help even more families. In February, I received an invitation to speak at a state legislative hearing about proposed reforms to HOA laws in Arizona. The legislature was considering a bill that would strengthen protections for military memorials and create clearer penalties for HOAs that violated those protections. I took a day off work and drove to the state capitol in Phoenix, where I testified before a committee of legislators. My experience showed me that even when the law is on your side, enforcing your rights against an HOA can be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining, I told them. Not everyone has the resources to hire an attorney and fight back. This bill would make it easier for veterans and their families to protect their memorials without having to go through what I went through. It would also make HOAs think twice before trying to prohibit protected displays. The bill passed the committee and eventually became law. It wasn't entirely because of my testimony, but I like to think I had played some small part in making things better for other veterans and their families. Spring arrived, and the desert bloomed with color. Marcus's memorial was surrounded by wildflowers that had seeded themselves from nearby plants, creating a natural border of yellows and purples. I let them grow, thinking Marcus would have appreciated the wild beauty more than anything perfectly manicured. One Saturday morning, I was out front trimming the edges around the memorial when a car pulled up, and a woman got out with 2 young children. She looked nervous as she approached. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "My name is Sarah Olson. My husband served with your brother in Afghanistan. When David saw the news story about your memorial last year, he told me about Marcus, about what he did. We were in town visiting family, and David asked if we could drive by to see it." A man got out of the passenger side of the car. He was probably in his early 30s, and he moved with the careful gait of someone with an injury. When he got closer, I could see that his left leg was a prosthetic. "Trevor Jackson," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Olson. I was Lance Corporal Olson when I served with Corporal Jackson." I shook his hand, feeling a lump form in my throat. "You served with Marcus." "I did. I was there the day he was killed. I'm one of the men who made it out because of him." David's voice cracked slightly. "He saved my life, sir. I've wanted to thank his family for years. When I saw that news story and realized you were here in Phoenix, I knew I had to come." The 2 kids, a boy and a girl probably around 6 and 8 years old, were holding their mother's hands and watching their father with wide eyes. "These are my kids," David said, turning to them. "This is Tyler and Emma. They're here because of your brother. They exist because Corporal Jackson gave me a chance to come home, to have a family, to have a life." I couldn't speak for a moment. I just looked at this man and his family, this living testament to Marcus's sacrifice, and I felt the weight of everything that had happened over the past year shift into perspective. The fight with the HOA, the harassment, the lawsuit, all of it had been about more than just a memorial. It had been about ensuring that Marcus's legacy was visible and honored, and now I was seeing the real impact of what he had done. "Would you like to see it?" I finally managed to say. We walked over to the memorial together. David knelt down in front of the plaque, and his kids knelt beside him. He read Marcus's name aloud, then the inscription. "Greater love has no one than this," he read, his voice steady now, "to lay down one's life for one's friends." That's exactly what he did. He was our friend, our leader, and he gave everything so we could live. Sarah had tears running down her face, and I realized I was crying too. Tyler, the young boy, looked up at me and asked, "Was your brother a hero?" "Yes," I said. "He was a hero, the very best kind." We spent the next hour sitting on my front porch while David told me stories about Marcus that I had never heard. Stories about his sense of humor, about how he would always share his care packages with the younger Marines, about how he had earned the respect of everyone in his unit through his actions rather than his rank. Sarah and the kids listened too, and I could see them trying to understand, to grasp the magnitude of what Marcus had done for their family. Before they left, David stood in front of the memorial one more time and saluted. It was a crisp, perfect military salute, held for a long moment before he dropped his hand. "Thank you for fighting to keep this here," he said to me. "Thank you for making sure he's remembered." "Thank you for coming," I replied. "You've given me a gift today, knowing that Marcus's sacrifice meant all this." I gestured to his family. "It makes everything worth it." After they drove away, I sat on the bench next to the memorial for a long time, thinking about the journey of the past year. It had started with Linda Patterson's clicking heels and her rigid adherence to HOA rules, and it had led to this moment, to understanding the full weight of what Marcus had done. and why it mattered so much that his memorial stood proud and protected. The memorial wasn't just a plaque and a flag anymore. It was a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny. It was a reminder that some things mattered more than property values and aesthetic guidelines. It was a connection between the past and the present, between sacrifice and freedom, between one man's courage and a family's existence. I thought about Linda Patterson sometimes, wondering if she ever understood what she had tried to take away. Probably not. People like her rarely saw beyond their own narrow view of how things should be. But in her attempt to exert control, she had inadvertently created something powerful. She had forced me to fight, and in fighting, I had discovered a purpose beyond my own grief. I had found a way to turn Marcus's sacrifice into something that helped others, that protected rights, that changed laws. The seasons continued to turn. Summer heat gave way to fall coolness, then winter mildness, then spring warmth again. I continued working with the Veterans' Rights Organization, helping other families protect their memorials and navigate conflicts with their HOAs. Daniel and I stayed in touch, and he occasionally referred clients to me when they needed someone who understood what they were going through from personal experience. The Saguaro Hills HOA, under its new leadership, became a model for how homeowners associations could operate fairly and transparently. They started a monthly newsletter that actually provided useful information instead of just listing violations. They created a community garden where residents could grow vegetables and flowers together. They organized neighborhood events that brought people together rather than keeping them divided by fear of stepping out of line. Robert Chen served another term as vice president, then was elected president when the position came open. He reached out to me one day to ask if I would be willing to serve on a community advisory council that would provide input to the board on major decisions. I agreed, figuring it was another way to make sure what happened to me never happened to anyone else. 2 years after the settlement, on the anniversary of Marcus's death, the HOA organized a memorial service at the community center. They invited all residents to attend, and more than 100 people showed up. Robert spoke about Marcus's service and sacrifice, and about the importance of honoring our veterans. Then he announced that the HOA was establishing a scholarship in Marcus's name, to be awarded annually to a graduating high school senior who was planning to enter military service or pursue a career in public service. Trevor Jackson fought to protect his brother's memory, Robert told the crowd. In doing so, he reminded all of us what's truly important. This scholarship is our way of honoring Corporal Marcus Jackson's legacy and ensuring that future generations understand the value of service and sacrifice. The first scholarship was awarded that spring to a young woman named Jessica who was heading to the Air Force Academy. She came to my house to introduce herself and to see Marcus's memorial. She stood in front of it in her graduation cap and gown, and she promised me she would serve with honor, just as Marcus had years past, and the memorial became a fixture of the neighborhood, as permanent and natural as the mountains in the distance. New families moved in, and their children would ask their parents about the plaque and the flag. Those parents would tell them about the Marine who had died to save his men, about the brother who fought to honor him, about how important it is to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. I continued to visit the memorial every day, maintaining it, talking to Marcus, finding solace in the ritual. The grief never completely went away, but it became something I could live with, something that didn't consume me but instead motivated me to live a life that honored both Marcus and Emily. On a warm evening in May, 5 years after Linda Patterson had first clicked her way into my yard to demand I remove the memorial, I sat on the bench as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The solar lights flickered on, illuminating Marcus's name. My phone buzzed with a text from David Olson. He sent me a photo of Tyler and Emma, now several years older, standing in their school's auditorium. The caption read, "Tyler's class did a project on everyday heroes. He chose Corporal Jackson. Thought you'd want to see." In the photo, Tyler was standing next to a poster board with Marcus's photo in the center, surrounded by information about his service and his sacrifice. The title across the top read, "A True Hero, Corporal Marcus Jackson, USMC." I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. This was why it had all mattered. This was why I had fought so hard against Linda and the HOA. Not just to protect a memorial, but to ensure that Marcus's story continued to be told, that his sacrifice continued to inspire, that his legacy lived on in the hearts and minds of people who had never met him, but who understood what he represented. The First Amendment lawyer had shut down the HOA Karen, who demanded I remove the military memorial. But the victory had been about so much more than winning a legal battle. It had been about defending the fundamental right to honor those who serve, about protecting freedom of expression against bureaucratic overreach, and about standing firm in the face of petty tyranny. Marcus's memorial still stands in my front yard, protected by law, honored by the community, and visited by people who want to pay their respects to a fallen hero. The flowers still bloom around it, the flag still waves above it, and the plaque still bears his name and the words that capture his sacrifice. And every single day, I walk past it and say the same thing I said the first time I stood there after everything was finally resolved. "We did it, brother. They tried to erase you, but you're still here. You'll always be here." That memorial represents everything worth fighting for in this country: honor, sacrifice, freedom, and the right to speak truth even when those in power try to silence it. Linda Patterson and her clicking heels are long gone, forgotten by most, except as a cautionary tale about what happens when small authority corrupts small minds. But Marcus's legacy continues to grow, touching lives, inspiring service, and reminding everyone who sees it that freedom isn't free and heroes deserve to be remembered. The sun finished setting, and the neighborhood grew quiet. I sat there a while longer, grateful for the journey that had brought me to this moment, grateful for the brother who had shaped my life even in his absence, and grateful for the opportunity to turn pain into purpose. The memorial would stand for as long as I owned this house, and if I had anything to say about it, long after that too. It was more than stone and brass and flowers now. It was a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost, and to the enduring impact of one good man who gave everything so others could live.